All right. We welcome to the church planning broadcast for December. We're excited, very thrilled to have Terry Virgo join in with us in the conversation this month. We're going to do some brief intros, just everybody can say who they are and where they are, and then we can turn it over to Terry to speak about developing leaders or whatever else is on his heart, and then we'll have some questions. If anybody's uh, we got some people watching along with us. You can tweet questions in using the broadcast CP hashtag. So we'll start with intros. I'm Mike. Broadcast for December. Excited, very thrilled to have. Sorry, we're getting some feedback here. Conversation this month. We're gonna do some brief intros. Just sorry about that. So I'm Mike. We're in St. Louis training to plant a church, most likely in California, which we're excited about, especially with the St. Louis winters, which are not like California winters. So maybe we'll go to Allie there. Allie, you can tell us about you guys.
Hiya. Yeah, we're Allie and Mike Green. We're at King's Arms in Bedford. And we were a bigger group, but part of our group has already gone to plant in France, and we are looking at general church planting for the future, potentially in Africa. There you go.
Very good.
I'm very excited to be here and to hear Terry tonight.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go to Colin and then Dylan after that. So Colin, you can tell us about you guys.
Okay, I'm Colin Barron. I'm in Manchester. Got a group of guys here, and we're planting a church in the south of Manchester in Withington.
Very nice. Then we got Dylan, my friend, the late ad, because we had some space. We'll go to Dylan and then Nathan.
Yeah, am I on? Yeah, I'm Dylan from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm on church planning training with Mike Young, and don't have a clue where I'm going or when, but just getting trained up right now. It's really good to be here and excited to hear from you, Terry, and connect with you guys.
Super. All right, Nathan, and then we'll go to Paul.
Hi, we are with Grace Church in Wolverhampton with Anthony Henson, planted there 3 years ago, and now we're gathering a team to plant into Wednesbury, which is a small town in the Black Country in the West Midlands.
Fantastic. Okay, Paul, and then Stephen, you can go after Paul.
Okay, hi, I'm Paul Jurier. I'm based at Hope Church, Worcester, and we're planting into Kidderminster in the West Midlands. Actually, I think it's Worcestershire, but there you go.
Okay, Stephen, your turn.
Yeah, hi guys. So yeah, I'm Steve. I'm from the City Church in Canterbury. Me and my wife, we're hoping to church plant in Dublin and sometime in the next couple of years.
Great. Okay, if you could mute your microphones just so we don't get any strange sounds. And I just want to congratulate everybody on very brief introductions. That was record time, so good job, everyone. So Terry, you can unmute your microphone and we'll turn it over to you. I don't need to introduce you because I think everybody here knows who you are. So you can share what's on your heart, and then when you're ready for questions, we can take questions.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Great to see you all. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's a privilege and a joy to speak to you. I'd like to pray, and then we'll talk. Father, thank you so much for joining our hearts and joining our lives tonight. Let your Spirit teach us, we pray. In Jesus' name. Amen. I thought I'd like to start by looking at a passage in the New Testament, and then most of our time will be in conversation, questions and answers. So I'm looking at Mark 3, where it says in verse 13 that Jesus went up on the mountain and summoned those whom he himself wanted, that they came to him. And he appointed 12 so that they would be with him and he could send them out to preach and to have authority to cast out demons. Okay, so we're looking at the archetypal raising up of leaders. That's what you've asked me to address. And here we've got Jesus raising up leaders. So I just want to look at a few of the phrases which I hope might lead to some conversation shortly. First of all, it says he went up into a mountain. In Mark's Gospel, every time that's referred to, he's going to a mountain. It's always very important. It speaks sometimes of its purpose moving on. And just to say that the raising up of leaders was obviously crucial to Jesus, and it's crucial to us. He gathered huge crowds, but his eye was on these leaders. He was looking after leaders. He was trying to find them and focus on them. And although it doesn't speak about it in Mark, it says in Matthew's account, or big part of Luke's account, he always majors on the prayer side. He says in Luke 6 that he prayed all night before he called them. So it's a very prayerful thing. Remember, Jesus said the harvest is ripe, the laborers are few. So here's one of the prayers we've been told to pray. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would thrust forth laborers. So praying for leaders is one of the things we need to be giving ourselves to. We've got very explicit command to do that. So he prayed, and then he gave this serious moment, and then he, having gone to that place, he invited guys to come to him. He initiated the whole thing. He was the one who invited the leaders. He didn't have a democracy whereby guys said, well, here are the men we think you should have with you. He made the choice. So leaders can initiate finding other leaders. They take the initiative. They don't let other people choose them for them. They don't let the religious hierarchy choose for them. They make the choices. And we need to be seeing that. We're making choices, whom we gather. And it's interesting that I know over the years I've had people try to suggest to me that I should choose them, and it doesn't work. You have to feel free to take the initiative. And it's an interesting combination. It says he chose those whom he himself desired, which sounds a bit casual, really. It sounds like he chose the guys he liked. But I think maybe it's more than casual. Maybe it's very important that he chose people he liked. Now, he prayed all night, so it's not a casual thing. Maybe it's a bit like marriage. You know, you probably pray about marriage, you pray about finding a partner, but it's good to have someone you like. And I know as a young guy, I came to a place where I thought, oh, maybe you just have to pray and then you just get married even if you don't like them, which I don't think would be very successful. So I think that's not a bad illustration. We pray, we look to God, but we also work with people we like working with. I really don't think there's any problem with that. Jesus chose the ones he desired that they might be with him. And you find the Apostle Paul choosing Timothy. It's something about Timothy that he wanted, and he took the initiative, and it looks like he asked the elders' permission and said, I'd like that guy. I think you must feel free to choose whom you feel comfortable working with. So it's an initiative from the leader to choose up other leaders. And it says they came to him. It wasn't they came to a teaching program. It wasn't that he sent them away to Bible college. They came to him. And we mustn't be scared, if God's called us to plant something, to invite people to be with us. It's not being invited to a statement of faith. Not that that's unimportant to have doctrine, we'll come back to that later, but it is a call to something personal, a call to relationship, and if we're going to build something, that's pretty crucial. And it says in the Old Testament, men came over to David and they said, we're yours, O David. It's a very personal thing. And And it says in the New Testament, Paul says they first gave themselves to the Lord and to us by the will of God. And that personal giving of ourselves to one another, I think, is very crucial. Last week I had the privilege of meeting a guy in London whom I'd never met before, and he'd begun to hear about New Frontiers and met one or two of our guys, and he was a very smart cookie. He's a PhD. He's involved in leadership training across Europe, and he works with Wayne Grudem and a few other well-known guys. And he said, I'm hearing about New Frontiers. He said, I have never heard of a group with such relational strength. He said, I don't know if you know how precious it is what you've got. He said, I would like to get you in front of hundreds of leaders and ask you thousands of questions, because you've got something relational, and so many men are lonely and they're not in relationship. And I feel it was quite interesting to me. Very often people ask me about how can you be reformed and charismatic. He kind of took that in his stride, but he said, I've never seen anything so relational. I've never seen people so joined to one another. I've met several of your pastors now. I'm absolutely fascinated with what I'm seeing. So it's an important thing. It's not the kind of hire and fire thing. It's not sending in your CV. It's not applying for a job. It's a guy inviting you to join him. It's initiative from above. And then it says this, he appointed 12. And I was doing a study on Mark a little while back, and in one of the commentaries it says, when it says appointed, it actually means he created, he made 12. It's like he's forming something completely new. Now we know that there's a sense in which it's very unique to talk about what Jesus is doing. Jesus obviously very unique, but there's something here I think we need to pick up. He's creating something. What he's doing is forming a people. He's forming the church, ultimately. But when we start planting a church, we are creating a new thing, and we're creating a culture. And it says Jesus made 12. He created something completely new. And that's part of what we're doing when we've planted a church. We're creating something, and the leaders, their mutual relationships create a culture that other people get added to. And I know whenever I visit a church, I'm always looking for where's that central group of guys who carry this? Where's the team? And sometimes you see a crowd, but you can't find the team. And I would say that this leadership formation, this raising up of leaders, it's not just helping guys find their skill, it's helping guys find their place in a team, because we work as a team. In the Old Testament, you get isolated figures. Sometimes you see them gathering people like David did, like Gideon did. But in the New Testament especially, it is going to be about team. And you'll find Jesus made 12. And it's also interesting to see that he made 12 from very different guys. So in the 12, he had a zealot who was like a terrorist, and he had a tax collector who'd sold his soul to the Romans. So these are very different kind of guys. I remember years ago saying to one of our guys who seemed to only be able to form friendships with other guys who were good at sport. That was their common ground. I said, you've got to get wider. You'll find your ministry is very limited if you don't get out of this mold. He just made good friendships with guys who enjoyed sport. He kind of dismissed other guys. I said, you've got to get wider. And Jesus was very wide, really. He only had 12 guys, they're all Jews, but one's a tax collector who sold his soul to Rome, and one's a zealot who'd happily kill any Roman he saw. And they're all in one team. And Jesus made them into 12 and made them into a foundation for the fellowship of what will grow around them. I think the forming of a leadership team is crucial. I think it's about building relationships as well as raising up their individual gifts. It's a corporate leadership. And that comes from sharing your lives, sharing vulnerability. It's important that there's intimacy in the group, which includes vulnerability. I think it's important that a team leader demonstrates that he needs his team. And I've always had teams that I need. I need the skills of the other guys in the team. They're not just my clones. I'm not just trying to make them like me. I need their gift. I need what they bring to the table. And guys really, they know they're valued if we express that, and we depend upon what they bring. That helps to make a team. So when we're raising leaders, we're also raising a team that's going to lead this church. And guys who know they're loved and valued and prized help to create a core in a new community that's coming. They create a culture of acceptance because they accept one another, and of love because the leaders love one another. And when there's tension among leaders, the whole church feels it. And there's a sense in which you can handle a storm on the edge of a church. You can handle that, but you don't want a storm at the middle. And so you want a team that speaks its mind to one another in the room. If they're frightened to confront, if they're frightened to speak their mind in the room, if they just agree with a forceful leader, because that's what you're meant to do, then they'll express themselves in the corridor outside when the meeting's over. When one turns to another and says, "Did you agree with him?" and the other says, "No, I didn't agree with him." But we don't say it in the room because we're too scared, so we say it in the corridor. And that's not building anything. So we've got to create a context where people can speak their mind, they're invited to, they're welcome to. So anything that needs to be talked about, you know it's there, it's in the open in the room, it doesn't have to be in the corridor. Everyone can hear it. So we're raising up leadership teams. So he raised up these 12, he made 12, and it says they were to be with him. Again, that's different to when I looked like I wanted to serve God, I was told, go away to Bible college. That's not the thing. It's being with people. It's being, they're invited to be with Jesus. They were going to be apprenticed. An apprentice is somebody said an apprentice is one bound to another to learn a craft. And when I went to Bible college, you just learned from somebody's notes and put it in your notebook, and then went to a lecture from somebody else. But really, we're trying to lead people. That's the Bible. The Bible way is to apprentice people and to help form lives. And it says about Jesus, if you think about it, it says in John's Gospel, the life was manifest, and we handled and touched this life. How do you raise up leaders? Well, you let men get close enough to touch you, to know what makes you tick, to know what the passion of your heart is. It says, they said to Jesus, teach us to pray. They got close enough to him to pray with him. The life was manifested. It's not just accumulating theological information or even just learning some skills. It's a life communication. It's being around someone that you want to lead you and gaining from what is on display. We touched and handled him. He was there. The life was manifest. And Jesus said in John 17, when he's praying about it at the end, I manifested your name to those you gave to me. In other words, I made your character known. When it says your name, it means who you are. And Jesus prayed that. I showed them what you're like. A leader has a huge responsibility that his life can be investigated, looked at. Is he consistent? Has he got integrity? How does he treat his wife, his family? How good is he at friendship? How good is he at keeping his word? And all the time, as you're doing these things, you're apprenticing other people. They're getting shaped as you've put a good example. It says in Hebrews 13, remember those who led you, who spoke the word of God to you, consider the result of their conduct and imitate their faith. It's good. It's good. A verse for us. It says, remember those who led you. So you help to lead a team of leaders. You're a leader who spoke the word of God. It's not just your bright ideas. It's we show our own submission to the Bible. We know that that's where we're getting all our authority from. That's what we're trying to lay down our lives in front of the Word of God, is what we submit to. And then it says, consider their conduct, that we're not just Bible teachers hiding behind the Bible. There's a conduct to watch. And then imitate their faith. Faith's huge. As leaders, you can't accomplish anything without faith. You can't even please God without faith. And one of our leadership responsibilities is to stimulate other people's faith, to teach them to believe. And a group of leaders who believe God together are a powerful force for God, whether it is in obtaining property or finance or more people. I believe corporate leadership faith stimulates a whole congregation and leads them forward. So we can help to teach people to pray. One of our young guys in England, Matt Hosier, who leads a church, he used to be with us in the Brighton church I led. I heard him say to people, I learned to pray in the prayer meeting at CCK. I learned to pray. That was at a prayer meeting I used to lead, and there would be a sense in which people were learning as we were praying. It wasn't a formal deal. It was obtaining things, it was praying together, asking, have we got faith for this? Are we receiving it? So we're stimulating other people's faith. That never happened to me at Bible college. No one ever taught me to believe God. No one ever taught me that. They tried to teach me Old Testament theology, New Testament theology, church history, all helpful. But you need, as a leader, to teach people to pray, teach people how to get hold of God and prove God. That's part of our calling in raising up leaders. And then obviously our relationship, so that in the end, as Paul said, I'm sending to you Timothy. He knows my ways in Christ. He's really learned the things that matter to me. He's been on the inside track with me. And that's a biblical way of training, I believe. And he knew what made Paul tick. He was able to communicate that. I think, just to say also, Jesus did invite commitment. In the sense he said, when people said they were going away, he preached some hard stuff about eating my flesh. As people departed, Jesus turned to his guys and said, are you going away? He was like, he's looking for an expression of commitment. I don't think that's inappropriate. And they said, no, who else has got the words of life? They wanted to stick with him. And then, of course, it says he chose these 12 to be with him, and then ultimately to them to be able to do what he'd been doing. So it wasn't just a kind of training thing, it was a real commissioning. So he's sending them. D.L. Moody said, I'd rather put 10 men to work than try and do the work of 10 men. We're trying to reproduce others. When we raise leaders, we're trying to reproduce people who themselves can reproduce faith, integrity, godliness, all these qualities that God's looking for. And so there are many ways that we do that. We train people, we create context for them, we then commission them. We may take them with us so they can watch us do things, or they sit in while we're counseling, or we invite people to sit in elders' meetings with us to see how we do things. We invite them into a context of seeing how we do it. And then we create a context where they can have a go at doing it. And then we can comment on that and bring our appraisal, correction, encouragement, and then we put them in a situation where they're free to go alone, because we've reproduced ministry. And we may find God teaches us to plant other congregations, different sites and so on, whether it's a complete church plant or whether it's another site in one church. We are releasing guys into their role. So there's a few principles which I hope will open up a few question areas which you might like to come back to me on. Okay?
Great, thanks Terry. Appreciate that. We'll get into some questions. We got a good 30 minutes or so where we can have a conversation about leadership. I can start us off and give you guys some time to form your questions, and we'll just go on down the line. I'm thinking, Terry, there's this kind of common wisdom about church planting. Early on, you are what is called a decathlete, where you kind of do everything at the church. You clean the bathrooms, you preach the message, you lock the doors. Have you seen, either in churches you've planted or other churches, is there a way to avoid that early by giving away responsibility early in the life of the church, or is it just a part of the thing where you have to kind of do everything yourself?
I think that probably you do. You do. You put your stamp on things early on. I think you demonstrate a serving heart, and I think gradually people pick up things for you. But I think it's quite important. I think, and also sometimes little things, people don't understand how important little things are. So I've always joked about chair arrangement is an apostolic ministry, and I know for myself I have a very keen feeling about how the chairs are arranged. It goes right back to when I first started, when that's, as you say, when I first came in, I'd arranged the chairs. And I think it's not a bad thing to carry those things at the beginning. I think people realize that you've learned the whole job from the bottom line up. It may well be that you may not have certain skills, like I don't have any technical skill, so my wonderful PA is sitting next to me pressing buttons, because I would never, we wouldn't be on if we didn't, if I didn't have that. So there are certain skills that, hey, you just don't have, and so you need one another. But I think the kind of shaking free doesn't need to happen too soon. I think it's not a bad thing to be evidently hands-on in many things at the very beginning.
That's great. That's helpful. Thank you. I'll remember that. And then next time we have you on broadcast, the whole topic will be how to arrange chairs to build a successful church. We'll get all the charts out.
I was at a prayer meeting last week, and the chairs were dismally arranged, and I thought, no, this will never do, and I was quite right. But I was too late. I'd arrived late. But yeah, some people just don't have a feel for it, and it affects the whole meeting.
Yeah.
So you get an instinct for these things.
Right. How about Ali? Do you guys have a question there for us, and then we can move on down to Colin? We got Ali coming through.
Yeah.
There they
There
are.
you go. I'm the PA.
Terry, can you please give us some examples where you had to make difficult decisions as to who to invest in and who not to? Obviously, you don't need to mention any names. But how did you make the choices, who to invest in and who not to?
I think you're looking for. I'm looking for transparency. I'm looking for people who don't have another agenda. So when I first started to build what we called the apostolic team when we began, and I was looking for guys who could be with me on that initial team, I was being pushed by a guy that I should start a team before I was even ready to do it. But I was very nervous of what I felt was ambition on his part. I think he wanted me to form a team because he could see his place on it and was looking forward to the promotion that he was anticipating. I'm afraid I felt that was kind of fairly apparent, and so when I actually did form a team, I didn't invite him because I was nervous of the agenda he was bringing with him. And another time, a guy joined me who already had a group of men looking to him, and again assumed that if he were to join me, in as much as he already had a degree of authority to others, I would automatically kind of promote him onto my team. And again, I felt I don't just get a guy, I get a guy with an agenda, I get a guy with, he's already already planning what he will do. And I think sometimes you can see that and read that. And then later I invited a guy who'd been actually in a Baptist church, was a very fine Bible teacher at the time when we were expanding our leadership team in the Brighton church, and I needed another pastor. And this guy had just been to our pastors' conference and been undone by what he'd seen and heard. And he said to me, I'm going to give up my job. I hate being a referee. He was called a Baptist pastor, but he said, I'm a referee. Everyone fights. I'm going to get out. And I got to meet him, had 1 or 2 meals with him. I said, I'd like you to join my team. And he said to me, but you don't know me. And I said, you're the most transparent man I've ever met. And I know you absolutely. And he joined the team. It was great. So I think you've got to be able to read personalities, read character, read something of people's motivations to feel safe with them. I think that phrase, chose those whom he desired. I think I felt safe with this guy. I felt, I know your heart. I can tell your heart. And he had a very good gift. He was a great preacher. But it was mostly, I felt very safe with a man I thought was evidently very godly. I was willing to throw everything away because he was fed up with being a professional pastor. He was just going to be, he said, I'll be a milkman. But no, he actually came and joined us. So I think it's reading character, reading whether there's another agenda there, and feeling safe that people will give you their heart.
Let's go to Colin. Colin, you guys got any questions, and then we can get to Dylan.
Yeah, from one or two in the group. Hi, Terry. When you're starting a church, your first 20 or 30, and you start, there's always a tension, it seems to me, in wanting to build a team and yet giving people responsibility too early, and then in a sense when you get a bit bigger, more gifted people come in, and so getting them disappointed. Any ideas? I've got a second question, but that's my first. How to manage that kind of challenge.
I think we can see that at several different levels where you see later on more gifted people join. I think that one needs to be as open as possible to say to people, look, will you help me with this? Well, as we are, you might say to them, unbelieving that actually this is going to grow substantially, and will you be happy for adjustment as we go on? I think it's being as open as we can from the beginning. It's important. Not everyone can necessarily handle that well, but I think being as open as possible, and try not to be too formal in terms of giving people titles or status, but just being friends, working together. But then with that realization, sometimes other more gifted people do come through. And I think when that happens, we do have to make adjustments. Otherwise, you get into unreality that someone who could help you look after 20 people are out of their depth when it's 120 or 320. So there has to be that flexibility that's built in. I think through our obvious friendship, through obviously being for people and not trying to give them a status or something that will later turn around and bite them.
Good. And the other question is, having people with different personalities, gifting from your own. I've seen often people not integrating people on a team because they're a bit scared. So the whole thing of having a chemistry that works, people that you like, but also having the breadth to be able to cope with people who come at things from a different angle. Any sort of clues into how to handle that and how to handle yourself when you can get upset or etc. when people are a bit forceful.
I think that we said at the beginning, choose those whom you desired. So I think your own personal affection and comfortable with people is one principle which I think is healthy and good. But the other thing, as I mentioned, with a guy who seemed to only collect a certain type of guy, who was really, sporty guys, and I just felt, hey, you're going to narrow yourself down. So if he might have said to me, well, these are the people I feel comfortable with. But I said, I remember having this conversation with him. I felt, if you're going to build something of any kind of size, you've got to learn to work with other people as well that you wouldn't naturally just gather with. What you're expressing is something it's not particularly kingdom. It's simply, your preference, how you like talking sport all the time. And he really received it well and did very, very well in widening that. And then I think, to take it further to your step where you can even get awkward, I think the difference is, I think you can have awkward people who don't have another agenda. They just think differently, and they appraise things differently, and they have a different kind of gifting. And sometimes their gifting can be quite scary because of its edge. And I think that the main leader's got, I know, a security in God that celebrates these distinctions, providing he knows the guy is actually for him. And I know I've learned a lot from you about this, Colin, over the years, where you don't mind expressing your opinion in a room, and I've appreciated it so much over the years. But you've often come at an angle that I wasn't coming from. But I've never ever questioned whether I had your heart or not. And I think that's what you prize in a team. I absolutely prize that in a team. That we're not all clones. We're not all yes men. We don't all sound the same. But there's terrific strength if these different gifts that can scare you because of their forthrightness or their clarity. If you know, hey, this guy's for me. This is a massive privilege to have this breakthrough character in our group. Maybe you get an edgy kind of evangelist who's just. I remember when Mike Springer was with us in Brighton, and we'd have an elders meeting, and we'd been going for about an hour or something, and he'd kind of say, "When are we going to talk about the lost?" It was just domestic and sorting out our stuff, and he's passionately saying, "When are we going to? Hey, we're supposed to be winning lost for Jesus," and yet, he knew he had his heart. But it was so good to have his edge as well. So a team is strengthened by different emphases, providing we know we're all for one another, and that's the best. I mean, it's so much better than a lot of people who just say yes, yes, yes. It's just not what we want. We want variety, but we do want to know, I've got your heart. If I've got your heart, I can receive all the funny, awkward things that are being said. I much prefer that. And I said earlier too that if we can disagree in the room, we know that we're safe in the corridors. We're not wondering, have I got little groups in my team and they talk to one another when no one else is around? And actually a lot of little splinter groups. And I think it's very important too when we're going, to things like multi-site, when in the room we agree this is what we're going to do, and then you go back to your team and your other side, and you say, we're going to do this, and they say, why? I don't understand why. And the guy said, well, nor do I didn't agree with him anyway, but this is what we're doing anyway. Well, you've lost it, really, because there's a nominalism that's not true, and the loyalty, that you cannot build something big when you're getting that kind of disloyalty, really, through lack of courage. And sometimes you've got to create a context where you must force disagreement out so that you can have it in the room, and we can handle it in the room. And yet we talked it all through. We looked at all the alternatives, and this is what we're going to do, and we're all in this together. I think that will get tested with growth and guys who are kind of almost on two teams. They're in the hub team, and then they're in the, sometimes it's just in the small group, or sometimes it's in the other site or campus of a growing church.
Great question. We'll go to Dylan in St. Louis, and then after Dylan, we'll head over to Nathan.
Hey, Terry, it's great to be here, man. I was just curious with with a plant and with just teams in general, what especially in a church plant, what gifting do you feel is key that you have to have in church planting? What gifts on the team do you need? And also, what are some vital signs that you see as, when you see these things, you think, okay, this is going to be a healthy growing church or a healthy growing team, and also things that you'd say, these guys are in trouble.
I think acceptance of one another. I think that knowing God's grace to us individually, people who just can't get over the fact that God's accepted them, so they're not putting up barriers, they're not trying to impress one another, they're not trying to put one another down. And I think that's why that thing about he made 12, he formed a team at the center, I think it's key to building, that we get a group of guys together, as far as we know how, who, you know, they've learned to love one another. And I think that's crucial. It comes through acceptance, it comes through willingness to forgive. I think a leader needs to watch out for relationships around the circle. If he can see some strain coming, if he sees one guy cutting across other guys when they speak, I think just to pick up where he can see strife could grow, could happen, and try and nip it in the bud, try and address it, to bring peace. We don't want to build just individual relationships to each person and become the vital. You can be a father in a way that you make every individual depend on you, and it can be very good for your morale. You feel very important, but you're not building a team. And I've seen leaders do that. They manipulate others by making everyone feel I've got a special track to the leader, and he makes me feel important, he makes me feel that I'm special. And that's not building a team where you can get all kinds of lovely relationships are crisscrossing the team, where people open up to one another, not just to the number one leader. So there's a kind of corporate culture that's growing amongst us. And I think the leader needs to encourage that along, so that it's not just a lot of strings that go to one hand, you know, but there's a real interweaving of lives. I think that builds much, much stronger. That's what we want to look for.
Great. Thanks, Terry. How about to Nathan, and then we'll get to Paul.
Thanks, Terry. Just thinking about when you said that Jesus invited commitment, sort of wondering, in a church planting context, what would it look like if you're inviting commitment in people? What sort of things are you asking them to be committed to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're not necessarily looking for that immediately. We're looking to build friendship. We're looking to build an easy relationship initially. We don't want people to feel they're just there to get caught. That you're wanting their name signed on some document or something. It's not that we're rushing into that, but I think at some point there needs to be some awareness. Hey, we're in this. We want you to know, count us in. We're on this journey with you, and so we're looking for that to come. Not before people have had opportunity. I think you find that sort of thing in the Gospels when Jesus said, what are you looking for? He said, come and see. It's one of his first meetings with the fishermen. Just says, come and see, come with me. And they get opportunity to get to know him. And then later there comes this thing, are you going away as well? And they say, no, we're with you. And I feel there just needs to be, you need to know who's with you. You don't need to do it too fast. And nor do you have to keep on repeating it. I know some churches that have, where they have a kind of covenant Sunday every year, and I know a pastor who absolutely wrecked a church by asking for strongly expressed commitment every year. He challenged them again, are you really committed? And people who'd actually quite happily given their heart felt they were just being pushed again and again to express commitment. It's like, well, didn't you believe me the first time? And you could be destructive by trying to win something that actually you've already got. And I saw this guy do very well, and then began to get very tense in making sure they're committed. And I think you can go much too far with that. And it was, people started leaving because they felt they were being possessed. So I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm just sort of saying, are you in on this? Are we in this together? Especially when you're pioneering, you need to know that nucleus, hey, we're in this, we're going to see this through. And we do it with faith, and I think we do it in a context of a lot of prayer, so that we're sharing our hearts before the presence of God, and we're expressing love. We don't feel we're walking on ice. We don't feel, or any minute we could fall through. These guys could pull out. They're just going to leave us. I think we're looking for at some point, say, no, look, we're in this. We're going to see this through together.
Very good. All right, Paul, you got a question, and then we'll get to Steve there.
Yeah, hi. Hello, Terry. I was just thinking about this whole thing of inviting people, and whether in doing that you look for a certain level of spiritual maturity first. Say, they've been a Christian a certain length of time, or would you, if you've got somebody that's quite new but just really full of God, and you like them and you feel you've got their heart, would you draw them in and sort of work with them like that, or would you want to hold back and wait until they've sort of matured a bit more?
I think that's a very good question, and I actually think it's interesting. We need to ask ourselves, what do we mean by matured? Sometimes people just are around, and we think that means they're maturing, but actually, what you described as someone who seems to have really caught hold of things quickly. Now, we've got to be careful. We don't want naivety, and the Bible warns us not to lay hands on people too quickly. But I think when you see growth, genuine growth, you think this is authentic. This is real excitement about Jesus. I'm much more excited myself about such people. I would tend to give time to them. Where I am now, we've got a comparatively young guy who we've invited to sit with the elders. I mean, he's still quite raw about his theology, doesn't know his Bible very well, but you just feel there's a passion for God. He's really serves. His heart's terrific, and you feel the Spirit of God on him. So for me, I would give a lot of weight to those things. And I think that your question is very well framed, because you're saying, do we wait for more maturity? But sometimes there's an implication, well, time produces maturity. I don't think time does. It's how we respond to God. And I think, people think age produces maturity, but age just produces old age. And I think maturity comes with people making good choices, good priorities, and good response to when God touches them. And I think you can see people suddenly break through. I know my own experience, to be honest, I was very, very backslidden as a teenager. And I got right with God when I was about 20, 21. And when I was about 21, I just packed up a very ungodly lifestyle, very ungodly, I mean really bad news. And I started reading Christian books, and I threw myself into fellowship wherever I could. And I think actually I found that it was quite a big church, about 600 or 700 in a Baptist church. And I suddenly realized I was going to the prayer meetings, and the prayer meeting was tiny. And a young assistant pastor said to me, actually, God's got, you've learned more in this year or so than many of the people who lead this, the deacons and so on in the Baptist church. And suddenly I was alive in God and making strides quite quickly. And I'm so glad he took me under his wing, helped me to go through. I think if I'd sat around waiting to get mature, in other words, I'm learning a bit more, I understand this and that, I don't think you're necessarily growing. I think to take someone on who's showing evidence of God's hand on them, put them in context of growth, I would encourage that.
Great, thanks, Terry. Okay, Steve, you got a question for us?
Yep. So if I can give a personal example, so I've perhaps inherited a couple of small ministry teams before, but they've already been pre-built for me, if you like. So for somebody who's never...
Can't hear you. Can you speak up? I can't quite hear you.
Is that any better?
That, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so just to give a personal example, I've been given a couple of small teams before, but they've all been built for me, if you like. So I've never built a team around me for myself before. So for somebody who's never done that before, what would your top bits of advice, do's and don'ts be for somebody who's never done that before?
I think again, if it's a new deal, to draw people who you are close to, people that, you know, friends of yours, people, and yet there's the sense in which you can take them further. But I think it starts through just personal friendship, probably. When you're saying that in the past it's been rather formal, I've been given teams, I just have to work with what I'm given. I think you find that the chemistry doesn't always work that way. And so I think it's getting close to people on a friendship basis. Again, if I may illustrate personally, when I was at Bible college, of course I had no leadership role, I was just a student. But I just started getting close to one guy, and I prayed with him. He started asking me questions. I found I was counseling him, and then another, and so on. And I found by the time I left college, there was quite a group that were gathering around. I didn't have any leadership role. I was just a student. But there was a kind of gathering that it came out of friendship, and then I found myself kind of leading. There was no formal context. It came through friendship, warmth, praying together, enjoying one another's company. I think it comes out of that personal relationship. And then when I went to my first church, there was already a body of leaders, and I was just employed, and I just had to get on with it. But they were not men I would have chosen. I was just the employee. I was the pastor, but I started meeting with younger guys in the church. I just prayed with guys, laid hands on them for the baptism of the Spirit, invited them to come with me when I preached certain places, and I just got friendly with a growing number of younger men in the church who were kind of instinctively following my leadership. So I had two things. I was the formal pastor of the church. If anyone said, who's the pastor of this church, they'd have said Terry Virgo. But the eldership team I was invited to didn't follow me at all. They were the effective leaders. And so I started effectively forming a people around myself, a younger generation, who were beginning instinctively to follow my leadership. And then what happened was these other guys actually left, and I had a whole team of people that were looking to me now that were actually looking to my leadership, not because I was the formal pastor, but because I was actually leading them and shaping them into a team.
That's great. Thanks, Terry. We got just about 5 minutes. I'm curious, just if you could speak here as we're wrapping up, to the role of prophecy in developing leaders. It seemed to be important to Paul, reminding Timothy about the prophecies spoken over him. How do we build that into our team cultures? That the kind of the fanning into flame, the gift of God.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been a major part in my experience. I think that where people are living with the prophetic that's been over them, certainly where you feel good about it, you want to encourage them. I've had a young guy come to see me this morning in my home, whom I'd never met before, who was living on various prophecies that had come over him in different locations. but to be honest, I didn't feel very comfortable that any of it wasn't helping him make good decisions, wasn't helping him along, but he was clinging to these words that I think people who didn't really know him had uttered over him in different locations. So for me, there's not always been a ground of security. I've often found it a place of insecurity. I tend to look for other things, but if I do know that people have got authentic, really good prophecies over them, yeah, or by all means, let's encourage them. Or if you feel you've got a word over somebody, and I know that has been my experience over the years. Sometimes I've just felt God's given me a word for them, or somebody I really value has given them words, knowing them, not just kind of. I feel nervous sometimes of prophets who come in without any responsibility, give a word, and then breeze off. Sometimes they give very big words to people, which they think will release them, and actually it ties them up in knots, or makes them hard to shepherd, because the danger is they could despise the shepherds because the prophet gave them some big word. And so you just need to be very, very careful with all that, I think. So I feel safer knowing people's personality, their character, knowing their work rate, and their loyalty. And yeah, if they've got a prophecy and you feel good about it, hey, let's exhort them, encourage them.
That's good. Thanks. Good word of caution. I guess, do you have any final words for us? We just have a couple minutes before we sign off. Anything you want to wrap up, Terry?
No, thanks for giving the time. It's great to see you all. It's an unusual way of communicating, but it's a real joy to be in your home with you, in the settings you're in. It's great to see your progress and to hear your heart's desire to build church and glorify Jesus. You're doing the greatest thing on the planet, helping to get churches started. So utterly for you, want to encourage you. And I think gathering guys close to you in leadership, that's such a big part of what you're trying to do. So I want to encourage you to keep going for it. And just remember that, yeah, they are watching you. They're watching how you handle setbacks, how consistent you are with things that you feel the vision God gave you. They'll be watching to see whether you hold that when it doesn't work, when there's challenges, and when people say you can't do that here, and whether you change tack quickly or whether you say, no, God's spoken to me. You know, people are looking for consistency. They build on your character, actually, as well as your gifting. We need both. We need gifting to inspire people, but we need character to feel safe with people. So sometimes that takes a little while. Like David was in the cave of Adullam. First of all, he took out Goliath, and it looked like the sky was the limit, and the girls started singing. He's slain his 10,000s. And then God put him in a cave and built men around him who watched how he handled things, how he handled Saul, and how he handled the unfaithfulness, the tough things, how he handled the setbacks. And he won their hearts, and he had a loyal army with him. So don't despise the delays. God's often building things in when there are delays.
That's fantastic. Thanks a bunch, Terry, for giving us your time this evening, and thanks to Caroline for pushing the buttons back there. Maybe we could all show Terry our appreciation with the customary silent wave from the broadcast. Everybody can wave and thank you, and we'll call it there. Hope you guys have a great Christmas. We'll see you back in January.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Great to see you all. God bless. Bye-bye.